Hey, I have a question. When you see a video on YouTube and it says that the car is the cheapest of its type on the whole internet, do you click on the video because of that, or do you click on it because you just like the car? Like, seriously, I don't know. Anyway, I paid absolutely nothing for this car, so I guess technically it is the cheapest car, but it's no different than if I paid £300, £500, £1,000, whatever, however much these things are worth now. It doesn't actually matter, because it's probably worth nothing now because I've ripped the engine out of it and put this thing in. Okay, so in this video and the next couple of videos, ignore that oil spill, we are going to be doing a load of preliminary work, which is hopefully going to lead us to, in the next couple of weeks, getting this thing at the very least turning over. In the coming weeks, we're going to start doing some work on the wiring, and that's just going to involve a lot of picking apart the existing loom, but not before we just connect it all up, connect it to power, connect it to fuel, and just see if it actually turns over. We've got to put an oil filter in there as well, obviously. But before we can do any of that, we've got some prerequisites that we need to go through first. So let's go over to the whiteboard and see what we have. Right, so at the whiteboard then, ignore all of this down here. We've got a list of things that I would like to try and get done today, but I'm probably not going to be able to. But the very first thing at the top of the list is we're going to strip the interior out, what's left of it. We're going to test fit the radiator. We're going to measure the fuel lines, test fit the downpipe, and prepare the drive shafts. So first of all, let's have a look at the interior. Right, so I think it probably goes without saying that we can't really do much in terms of wiring if we still have the majority of the interior still left in the car. Now, in a couple of videos ago, we removed the dashboard, and that was just so that we could get to the behind the dash, so that we can do the clutch pedal and we could do the gear selector. But now we need to start getting underneath all of here. I've also got this thing to fit, which is the throttle pedal, which is going to need a bracket, which means it's probably going to need to be welded. And we really do not want to be welding when we've still got carpets inside the car, right? Also, this steering wheel is starting to grow stuff on it. I will clean that in a sec. I've got a boot that's just full of stuff, including my massive subwoofer still, so that needs to come out. And basically we just need to strip this whole thing out. So let's do that now. Now, luckily for me, the interior of this car has been in and out a few times. This is just from various upgrades that have been done to the car over the years that I've had it, including the pop-out rear windows, upgraded seats from a Super S, and at one point I even swapped the entire body loom over from a higher spec model so that I wouldn't have to splice wires in for things like electric windows. It has become a bit of a dumping ground over the years though, so there are one or two strange items that I definitely didn't put here. Anyway, the rear seat cushion comes out with all the ease that you would expect it to, followed by the rear seats themselves, and then it's time to move on to the boot. There's a similar amount of junk that's accumulated in here over the years, but once that's all gone, the lower plastics can be removed, and then finally the carpet can come out. Right, that took some time, but we have the entire interior stripped. Carpet, seats, left the door cards in as I said before, and the reason I've left the door cards in is there's a lot of stuff back there like electronics for the windows and stuff that I didn't really want to have hanging about, and just made sense to just leave them there since they're not in the way. So if we have a look inside, it's actually not too bad in here. Aside from some pretty shonky seam sealing at the factory, the condition of the inside of here is perfectly fine. I can't see any major rust holes. I can't see any major problems in here at all. The only rust I can see is around the back. It's just where there's clearly been some moisture or something that's just sat here, but it's really just surface rust. I reckon I can just wire brush all that off. So really not a problem. What it has done is uncovered a few of my previous transgressions. If you look here, we've got some DIY holes. They get pretty bad over there actually, and that's because when I fit these pop-out windows, so this car didn't originally come with the pop-out windows. They were just standard windows that were just kept in with a rubber seal, so they didn't pop out like these ones do. But you could retrofit them, and I was retrofitting a lot of stuff in this car at one point, and pop-outs were one of them. So weirdly enough, with this particular car, they left a lot of holes in for a lot of things. So like when I was putting these in, the holes were there, I just needed to put a riv nut in and that was it, they were ready. But at the back, the holes weren't there. And along here where this plastic trim would normally go, because on the standard car this is just bare metal, but it's just painted steel, so you'd see this from inside the car. But when you put the pop-outs in, you have a trim, and I needed to make holes for that to go in, and as you can tell I did a fantastic job. Professional grade workmanship. So I'm going to have to probably weld all those back up actually, because I don't think I'm going to put those trims back in, but it does look a bit unsightly. Anyway, the interior has now been completely stripped, which means we can now take this one off the list. There we go. Which now means we can start looking at radiators. So let's do that next. Now I have a few radiators that I can pick from. The first of which, we've already looked at this one in the past, a few episodes back, maybe near the beginning. This is a P11 Primera radiator. And this is one that you'll probably find quite commonly used on SR20 swaps on Micras. These actually fit quite well in the car if you're using an SR20. And the reason for that is because the SR20 is one of those engines that has the exhaust on the front. You've got the exhaust coming out the head, down the side of the block, down underneath the engine, and then straight out the back. So it doesn't take up an awful lot of room, as in it doesn't stick out much. So these fit quite well even with the fans. But with my engine, the intake's at the front and it sticks out quite a lot, so this just doesn't fit. So we can't use it, and I don't really want to use this one anyway, because even if it does fit, there's no aftermarket for these. So this one is a dead end as far as I'm concerned. Next up, we've got this one. It's a Corrado VR6 radiator, I believe. This one is nice and short. It fits nicely underneath the intake manifold. The only problem is that it's just a little bit too wide by about 10 mil. So it won't actually fit between the headlights. It isn't going to work, which is a shame because it's the perfect height. The only other thing about this one is that it doesn't have a top fill. In fact, there's no way to fill this radiator at all. I believe because it's a VW system, it fills through the coolant cap, through the coolant bottle, I think. So unless I fit one of those, I wouldn't be able to use this one anyway. And then this one is one that I'm just borrowing just for testing. And this one is from an NA, or Mark 1 Mazda MX-5. Actually, it's from a second generation NB MX-5. And this one is actually slightly narrower than the Corrado radiator. It's only a little bit taller. It's top fill, as you can see here. So, and because the MX-5 is quite a well supported platform, so if I need to get a new one of these, shouldn't be a problem. Like I say, this one I'm just borrowing just to see if it fits. I may end up buying it if it does fit, but I think we're going to see if we can get this one to fit. I know it seems like I'm making a big deal out of using off-the-shelf parts here, and custom parts do make the project more interesting. But there are instances where making a part from scratch or modifying existing parts to fit isn't the smartest move, especially for things like radiators that take damage and need replacing over the lifespan of the car. If something like that happens, then I don't want to have to mod the part to fit before I can install it. Even if this car is made up of parts from dozens of different cars, an off-the-shelf part from a well-supported platform is going to get me back on the road much faster. Assuming I make a note of which parts I'm using and where. With everything the way it is now, this radiator is sitting way too high. And the reason why it's sitting too high is if I just bring you over here, the top of the radiator is basically above where the slam panel should be. The bonnet is just going to hit that. So the whole radiator actually needs to come down by a fair amount. Now luckily, I've already gone through all the effort of making this. This was a couple of episodes ago, so have a look at that if you haven't seen it already. This whole thing was made with the intention of that it was going to be cut up so that I could basically drop this down. But what I am going to have to do is cut a notch out and drop the whole thing down like that. And this whole radiator will basically sit within this this box section, and it will drop it down by, I don't know, what is this, 80 millimeters? So I reckon we could drop it down by about 6 centimeters, which is about that much. Oh, careful. And then we have to deal with what we're going to do with the slam panel. Right, factory slam panel going in place. I've actually cut a section out so that it will clear the throttle body, and I've rotated the throttle body by some amount. I don't know, I can't remember which way it's supposed to be, but I've turned it in such a way that the gubbins, the stuff that makes it move, is down at the bottom now, so that it's not in the way anymore. So that now sits nicely in there. Now, I don't think we're going to be able to use this. If I was to try and put the radiator where I want it to go, it's basically going to hit this. Like this can't be where it is with the radiator in place, right? Because the radiator is, at least on the Micra, is designed to go within this structure, and it can't go there because, well, there's a great big manifold in the way. So it's going to have to sit forward more than it normally does, but not so far forward that it interferes with this. Now I know what some of you are going to be thinking: why don't you do away with all of this and just use those aero catch things that, you know, you put them in the corner here like this, and then you poke a pin through the top of the bonnet, and then you have latches that keep it shut. I don't like the look of them, at least on this car. I can understand why you'd use them in the application, like in motorsport and things like that. You want to be able to take them off easily, but on something like this, it just doesn't look right. So I would like to try and retain this mechanism, and doing so is going to be quite a challenge. So that's something for me to think about, but we've test fitted it. We can see how it all works and what isn't going to work. So I think we can cross this one off the list, pending some investigation on how we're going to be able to do that in a graceful way that lets us retain the factory bonnet catch. Next, all we have to do is measure the fuel lines. Where's my calipers? It has 7.6 millimeters, 7.5 millimeters. I'd say that's within margin of error, so that's a 7.5 mil internal diameter. All right, now I'm probably just going to order a decent length of this stuff anyway, because it's always better to have too much than not enough. But I'm just going to use a tape measure here to work out roughly how much we're going to need. So what we need to do is, we've got the fuel filter here, we've got a return, which is one of these two, I think it's that one. The fuel inlet on the, well, the inlet and the outlet on the fuel rail is on this side of the engine. That's because on the platform that this engine came out of, the fuel comes in on this side, on the Micra, so that causes a bit of a problem. Now I could make the fuel come up and around here, but I don't really like how close it gets to the hot side of the turbo. So I'm actually going to make it come along the front here like this, and then alongside the fuel rail, and then back in on itself. So I'm going to say, roughly speaking, I'm reading that as 90 centimeters. We add some on for a bit of slack. That's about a meter. I'm going to say 1.5. I'm going to say about 3 meters of this stuff, just to be safe. So 3 meters of fuel hose. Done. We can now cross that one off the list. And done. Right. This one I have not been looking forward to because it involves getting under the car, and I hate that. What you're looking at here is a reproduction downpipe from eBay. This one comes with the cat and comes with a flange, comes with a flexi. There's something rattling inside of here. Now you might notice that on here it says illegal to supply for type approved vehicles first used on or after the 1st of March 2001. So what I've done here is I've actually picked a non-type approved downpipe with catalytic converter, and the reason why I've done that and not gone for the type approved version, of which there is one available, is because, simply put, that version is twice the cost of this one. I'm not saying that I'm not willing to pay the money for a type approved cat, but I am saying that given that the amount of chopping up I have to do on this thing, I'm going to be more annoyed if I mess up the more expensive one than if I mess up the cheap one. So what I'm going to do is, because this is all going to need to be cut up so that it'll fit, because it's not just going to bolt on, this actually comes out quite far from the back of the block, whereas I actually need it to come down a bit more like that. So I'm going to have to do some stuff to get it to fit. And I'd much rather get all cutty, experimenty on this one, this cheaper one, and it still have a catalytic converter, even if it's not a type approved one, than go out and spend all the money on a type approved one, which is going to be the same quality as this one, which, as you can tell by the welds, isn't great, and then have to do the same thing. So I'm going to get everything working with this one, and then the next one after this will be probably a proper stainless system with a good cat in it, and it will be built on the car rather than me trying to jerry-rig this one to work. With that said, however, just out of interest, I would like to see what I'm up against, because it might be that I can actually I might actually have better room than I think, but I won't know for certain until I just offer it up and see where it's going to cause me problems. I think the best place for me to go in is from the side. Right, so immediate problem is that the anti-roll bar is in the way. That actually needs to go over the top of that. Yeah. See if I can thread it through. No, I can't. One moment. I'm just removing some bolts that I left in situ. These are the bolts that were keeping the cross member in place. I put them back in so that I don't lose them and to keep the threads clean. But now they're in the way, so out they come. You can't see any of this. No, I'm catching focusing on something. Okay, I'm going to try and put this in upside down. And then rotate it. Okay. Okay, I thought I got somewhere. Ugh. But it's not happening. I'm going to have to remove the anti-roll bar so that I can lift the thing up into place rather than trying to feed it through. Right, so I've jacked the car up a bit so that I can get underneath a bit easier. And here you can kind of see, just up there, where my finger is pointing, is where the turbo comes out. And unfortunately on the KO3 and the KO3S, the turbo outlets straight out the back rather than to the side like the KO4 does. Can't run a KO4 because the KO4 sticks out further towards the bulkhead, so I just wouldn't have room for it, I don't think anyway, based on my measurements. So if I try and manipulate this thing around, which I can't do whilst holding the camera, basically it can't get up there. Steering rack is in the way, this is all in the way, everything is in the way. So this is going to come out. I must have fed it in from the other way. Right, coming in from the other side now. What I have here, this is the offcut from the original, I presume to be factory part of the downpipe. And it wants to go like sort of in there like that, right? Except it won't because steering column is in the way. Specifically the part where the steering column attaches to the steering rack. So if I was to just put it sticking down the way that it wants to, it isn't going to fit. In fact, I can't really think of any way where it is going to fit, because in the Mark IV platform there is about a mile of distance between the back of the engine and the bulkhead, and in this car there isn't. I'd love to know how they fit one of these in a Polo, but they somehow did it. So I'm gonna have to come up with something. I don't know what. I think what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna come out from under here because, okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm probably going to cut this off. I'm just using this as an example, but actually this is probably a better quality part than the one that came on the pattern part, so I might actually just end up using this. I'm going to cut here, and I'm going to have to just make a pipe that comes straight off of there. This flexi will then attach to that, and then I'll have to make it mate up to the rest of the downpipe as it comes from the tunnel of the car, if that makes any sense. Basically, I'm going to have to make something completely custom with a bunch of offcuts. So that's not going to be something that's going to be easy. I knew that that exhaust wasn't going to fit. Like, I'm not stupid. I just it didn't occur to me until I had the full length of the thing in my hand just how much it wasn't going to fit. Because before I just had this, and offering this up, I kind of thought, I could probably make this work because it's quite small, right? But it's hard to tell exactly where it comes from there. So yeah, that's going to be a one for another time, I think. But I think I know what I'm going to do. Right, test fit downpipe. I'm going to mark as complete because we did test fit it, even though it didn't fit. Prepared drive shafts. I'm just not going to have time for that because it's nearly, well, it's just gone past 6:30 and kick out time is 7, so I need to tidy up. This shouldn't take too long. I just need to pull apart the shafts I have, then send them off to get them welded. So I will do that next time I'm up here. Okay, so we're back for another day. I wanted to get the drive shafts done. Before I move on to doing the drive shafts, I'm going to add one more thing to the list first. Before we can even think about trying to start the car for the first time, we need to do something about all the stale fuel that's been sat in the tank for the last 3 or 4 years. So before we put some new fuel in, we'll need to remove the old fuel first. So we're going to do that one next. Right, that's done. We've managed to extract about 3.5 litres. This is a 5 litre container. About 3.5 litres of probably very stale petrol. Wasn't able to get all of it out, just because of the shape of the bottom of the tank. There's small channels and ridges and things at the bottom of the tank, and I just couldn't get to those. So there's still a little bit in there, but that's going to be completely diluted by whatever new fuel we put in. And then that's an empty container, which I'm going to fill up with some fresh stuff ready to hopefully get the thing started next week.